In the news this week, as Term 1 starts, several Perth schools have been hit with COVID, raising questions if WA is prepared for variant X. An exclusive with Dr. Andrew Miller on this looming issue.
Perth braces for months-long food shortages as issues with eastern states' supply lines continue. Chinese New Year has hit Perth as the WA Association put on a festival to announce the Year of the Tiger. Plus, Dr. Mark Duncan-Smith's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. Western Australia has returned to school for just 1 week and the virus has already infiltrated several public schools. At least several students across Perth are infected, forcing hundreds of students and staff into isolation. This, amidst other issues, raised concerns around the unknown variant and if Western Australia is well prepared for variant X. AMAWA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller joined me exclusively this week. Dr. Miller, thanks for joining us in such short notice. The infection in WA schools is something many parents feared for. Should public schools continue?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's important that parents be given choice and options. Now, it's different for different families and certainly different for different children in terms of what their needs are. But where possible, families should be offered the option of remote learning and schools should be given extra resource to cope with that. And we should be doing a lot more to make schools safer. So we do need to have clean air in the schools, we do need to have masks, and we do need to have masks on children when there is Omicron out and about in the community. And we need to be speeding up the vaccination program, third dose boosters, and also the vaccination for kids.
You've been calling for HEPA filters, fresh air ventilation and high-quality masks since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, although your wishes have been fulfilled, Omicron is here now. What's the next step from here?
Well, it's really gratifying to see that the department has recognised that that's what needs to happen, that there needs to be clean air. So now they need to deliver on that. And if you've got 20,000 HEPA filters on order for 70,000 learning spaces in Western Australia, that's clearly not going to be enough. And if you've done inadequate audits during the school holidays to see how much stale air there is in these rooms without measuring it when there's actually kids in there, then clearly that's not good enough. So having understood what the problem is, they now need to implement the solution. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for all that to happen, parents should be supported doing what they need to do. Now, we know that most kids are not going to get sick, but that's not good enough. It's like we know most kids are not going to get cancer, but we still treat cancer and we spend a lot of resource and we spend a lot of time trying to look after those poor kids and those families that get cancer. Now, this is going to be a lot more common than that in terms of outcomes which are worrying for parents. So that would mean children getting sick and needing hospitalisation or children having symptoms for a prolonged period of time. This is not something that we can just wave away and pretend it's not happening. So we look forward to children's safety being taken just as seriously as that of parliamentarians, for example.
Okay, so should parents be concerned about this?
Well, I think parents should be concerned, but they don't need to panic. They do need to understand the situation in the classroom that their child's going into, and they need to also be accelerating where possible the vaccination program and putting pressure on, giving feedback to their local MPs to get this happening.
Do we have any vaccination targets for children in Western Australia?
No, there's nothing linked to a vaccination target of a certain percentage of children. It doesn't seem to be part of the easing of community restrictions, but it's probably something that goes into the mix because not only schools a place where children and teachers can get Omicron, but it's somewhere that it can be taken back to families. And this is not as simple as one statistic, one number. This is a bunch of families, all different age groups, grandparents, people who have immunosuppression from chemotherapy or long-term treatment for other diseases. And so we need to understand that it's not acceptable, even if only a few percent get a severe outcome, because those few percent are precious just like everybody else, and we need to do everything that's reasonable. We're not saying close all the schools now. What we're saying is make them safe and give parents options.
And finally, are WA schools ready for the unknown variant, or we call it the variant X scenario?
Well, this whole society's not really accepting that the pandemic is not going to be over after this wave of Omicron, unfortunately. And so we need to understand that the upside of putting in place things like HEPA filters, CO2 monitoring, fresh air in classrooms, is that will work on all variants. All variants are going to be airborne unless this thing mutates dramatically. That's the way it spreads around. And if it doesn't spread that way, it won't be a successful variant. So if we get a super Omicron or a super Delta or a variant X that comes in, then all of those airborne protections, including things like masks, are going to be effective against that. But we're not ready for that yet because we have not implemented it. We're still doing our homework in the car on the way to school.
Dr. Miller, thanks for joining us this week.
Stay safe. Thanks, Ivan.
Supermarket shelves remain empty as rail and freight struggle to get into Western Australia after floods destroy transport infrastructure at the border.
Meanwhile, panic buying continues as the government calls the calm, urging shoppers to only buy what they need.
WA has received the first supply of goods by rail as the McGowan government urges Western Australians not to panic buy more supplies than needed. The first freight train from Kalgoorlie carrying food and essential supplies arrived in Perth on Saturday following extreme weather in South Australia. Flooding in South Australia has washed out more than 300 kilometres of the only rail line that brings food and supplies from the east coast to WA. Staples including pasta, sugar, toilet paper, medicines, sanitary items, some meats and frozen foods have been running low as a result of the weather event. It led to major supermarket chains including Coles and Woolworths have been forced to introduce buying limits on some products.
But this train in particular has been bringing back stranded containers that were in South Australia and WA.
Yeah, credit to a lot of people involved in this, Pacific National, the state government. It's a lot of things had to come together. I know there's been a lot of temporary truck permits put out by the state government to get it happening. So it's going to take a lot more of this, but it's a step in the right direction.
The government has reassured Western Australians that there would be enough food and supplies for everyone.
The annual celebration of Chinese Lunar New Year is underway in Northbridge this evening. Thousands flocked to welcome in the Year of the Tiger, despite the looming shadow of Omicron. Traditional lion and dragon dances served to make everyone smile, while Zodiac lanterns lit the night. Nelson Liu reports.
The Chinese Lunar New Year has begun, with West Australians joining together to kick off the Year of the Tiger. People have filled Perth's Cultural Centre for Chunghwa Association's annual New Year Fair, inviting all people to celebrate the start of the year together. West Australians are being treated to food stalls, arts and crafts, cultural demonstrations, lion dances, as well as multicultural performances. Specially introduced this year is a lantern display featuring the 12 animals of the Zodiac. Organisers say the event is a success once again, despite concerns about Omicron this year.
Yes, I'm quite happy that so many people come and celebrate. We like all the line dance groups to join together to celebrate, to start celebrating Chinese New Year.
We're very lucky in Western Australia. We're dealing with a state of emergency and a global pandemic, and we're living with our freedoms.
Meanwhile, WA Police have allayed fears about the spread of Omicron at the fair. With a vaccination bus, they're giving people a chance to stay safe.
Absolutely, and look, I've got to say, when it's announced that the vaccine bus here, we already had a large queue behind us, queued up to get their booster shots.
Chinese New Year celebrations continue until February 15, while the fair runs until 9 p.m. tonight. Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
The opposition has attacked a decision by the state government to stop families utilising underground parking at Perth Children's Hospital. Liberal MP Libby Mettam commented on the decision. The Shadow Minister described the decision as cruel and ill thought out. She said that closing access to the car park will make life even harder for these 6 children and their families. According to the hospital's website, the change was made to protect visitors, patients and staff from COVID by centralising access and controlling entry points to the hospital. They also wrote there is an alternative parking in Car Park 1. Ms Mettam also said that the shuttle bus service provided will be inadequate for the immunocompromised children to use.
WMN News will be launching a weekly podcast called East Plus West this month, co-produced with 6 News. This podcast will focus on the big stories here in the West and over on the East Coast, and most importantly on how they impact one another. Ivan Lung and Leah Polisi will be hosting the podcast every week in a bite-sized format starting in 2 weeks' time.
I think it's fantastic, and it really highlights the connection we have as both being independent and unbiased news outlets, and we're both pretty proud of that fact. And for us to not only share footage and share resources that we've done before, but do a joint production, I think that's incredible, and I think it's something people really want to listen to, because if you're looking for independent news, not only can you get it from one source, you can now get it from two sources, which both have resources on both ends of this massive country.
The audio podcast will be available exclusively to WMN Extra News Club members. You can subscribe now via the link in the description.
Crime rates have reached a record high in WA's remote communities, prompting political intervention. The WA member for the Mining and Pastoral Region, Neil Thompson, will host several community forums to find out how to tackle this growing issue. In 2021, some crimes in the area were at their highest rate since record began in 2007. Those living in the Kimberley are 11 times more likely to have their cars stolen than people in Perth, and their businesses are 14 times more likely to be burgled.
To come along, there will be forums being held in the Kimberley from the 5th through to the 9th. So we're starting in Broome on the 5th of February. We'll be in Kununurra on the 6th, Halls Creek on the 7th. We're going to just meet one-on-one with anyone who would like to meet in Fitzroy Crossing on the 8th. And then Derby, we're going to be there to meet again the community in a forum. So we would love to see as many people as possible and see if we can bring some attention to this massive problem.
4 people have been charged by police for allegedly blocking traffic at the Mitchell Freeway this week. Anti-vax demonstrators allegedly stood next to 6 stopped cars between Scarborough Beach Road and Power Street in Osborne Park at around 7:50 a.m. on the 31st of January. Police allege the drivers of those cars coordinated to block traffic as part of the protest. Police cleared the traffic immediately, directing drivers to move on. As a result of an investigation, 3 men and a woman have been charged by summons with obstruction of vehicles, an offence which carries a maximum penalty of $2,800 for a first offence and $4,200 for any subsequent offence. Police are working to identify any others involved in the illegal protest.
As Western Australia welcomes the Year of the Tiger, thousands flock to Northbridge to celebrate the Chinese Lunar New Year festivities. So what are the Chinese community leaders' favourite Chinese zodiac signs? Let's find out.
I mostly just roost because I was born in the year of roost.
Okay,
Yeah.
so roost is chicken.
Yes.
Okay, what do you like about the chicken? What do you like about
Oh, just know it's quiet, peaceful, and fit people.
It has to be the year of the horse, doesn't it? Because that was the year that I was born, 1978.
Okay, what do you love about it?
Well, I think 78 for the year of the horse was an earth sign, which is a good thing, like I care about the planet. And horses like to be active and energetic and part of the community.
The tiger is actually, it's a special event, doesn't come around that often.
What do you love about the tiger?
I don't know, tigers to me are a beautiful creature, very fierce in their background, but the colours and what they represent have always been something I've been fascinated as a child.
Speaking of Zodiac, Melly, what's your favourite?
I do like the dragon, I must admit. What about you, Ivan?
Are you a dragon?
I am, of course.
Ooh,
2000.
I'm snaked. 1989.
A year too late to be a dragon then, it seems.
Well, at least I can slip and you can fly.
Flying
that is a good thing. And now, here's AMA WA President Dr. Mark Duncan-Smith with his weekly COVID-19 update and commentary.
I hope you're doing well, and hopefully better than our school kids. What I'd like to talk about today is the second week of furloughing or quarantine for school children who are the close contacts of people at school. Obviously, schools have gone back and we've already got 4 schools shut for various periods in time. And that's at the moment 0.5% of our kids in WA are in quarantine or furloughing. Now, 1 week is justifiable and 1 week is backed by evidence, but not the second week. There is little or no evidence from an infectious disease point of view or from a public health point of view that justifies a second week of isolation for children who are close contacts. Over the last 2 years in Western Australia, not a single, and I repeat, not a single person has converted from COVID negative to COVID positive in a second week of isolation following furloughing or isolation with a close contact. Now, people will remember out there that people have gone COVID positive in quarantine in the second week. And yes, that did occur. That's because the patients or the people were in quarantine and actually caught COVID in quarantine in not fit for purpose quarantine facilities. So that is not the same thing. That's where the government gave them COVID when they forced them into quarantine. The evidence for internationally for Delta is that the second week has less than 1% chance of picking up a conversion from COVID negative to COVID positive. Now that was with Delta. With Omicron, the incubation period is even shorter. So therefore the chances of picking up or someone converting from COVID negative to COVID positive in the second week is even less than it was with Delta. Now for that second week at the moment, 99 to somewhere around 199 out of 100 or 200 children are having a second week of quarantine for absolutely no reason. Now let's look at the flip side and say, okay, let's say one of those kids does convert and get symptoms in the second week and turns COVID positive. Well, what happens there? Well, they're already in they're basically just get dealt with as a new case, and people who've been in contact with them have to isolate for a week. Now, if we were in a COVID zero environment, which we're not, and nor does the AMA-WA support that we should be, well, then maybe that might be justifiable to stay closed for 2 weeks for kids. But pubs are still open, restaurants are still open, there's no density limits, nightclubs are super spreader events and they're still open. So in other words, even if there was a minuscule chance that a kid might convert in the second week, well, we're not in a COVID negative environment anyway. So this is a problem in that there's a hypocrisy of the overall policy of the McGowan government with this. He wants to lock the children up for a second week for no reason, and yet he's still happy to have nightclubs open. It just doesn't make sense. And this is what leads to social non-compliance. Now, I would rather see some social restrictions in place that make sense, some social restrictions that are consistent with South Australia that did do the COVID opening well, and they kept their peak below that would saturate their medical workforce and resources. And they are the model, they are the blueprint of how to open up and open up well. I would certainly urge the government to look at the South Australian model and how that was achieved. But with those children having that second week in isolation for essentially no reason, it is not justifiable, it is indefensible. I have great concerns that the Premier is not following medical advice, because the medical advice can't be to stay closed for the second week because there is no evidence to justify the second week. What we're seeing already is that parents, rather than sticking their kids in a room for 2 weeks, are actually putting the whole household into isolation. Now, that has the consequences of taking 1 or 2 people out of the workforce. And obviously, we also want kids to go to school to be educated and have those social contacts. So there is very good reasons for those kids to want to be at school and for us to want those kids to be at school. I have concerns that the Premier is just sticking to his guns for what is an antiquated and an outdated policy, and that he is actually not following the Chief Health Officer's advice. And it does appear that the Premier is still playing Where's Wally with the Chief Health Officer when it comes to press conferences. And the Chief Health Officer should be at each press conference so that they can answer independent questions from the independent media. So, should children be in the second week of isolation? No way. There is no reason for it. It is punishing them, it is harming them, and it shouldn't be done. Take care.
That was Dr. Mark Duncan-Smith, and now here's Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. Today on 6 News, breaking news. Parliament set to sit in just over 48 hours as the fallout continues from multiple leaked text messages about the Prime Minister, where Scott Morrison is called a liar, a fraud, a psycho, and a horrible, horrible person. Plus, COVID cases trend downwards here at home, while overseas, more European nations ease their restrictions. Denmark, Ireland and France, some of the latest to relax rules, even as Omicron continues to spread rapidly across the continent. And the fallout continues after TV host Whoopi Goldberg was suspended from US talk show The View after saying that the Holocaust wasn't about race. Reaction coming in from former co-hosts and the general public. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel. Just search 6 News Australia to find us, or our website at 6newsau.com. For now though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
From Melly and myself, we wish you good health, good night, see you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.